Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The sheer ambition of the project is breathtaking. Imagine a single intellect setting out to catalog, understand, and systematize the entirety of human knowledge and the natural world as it was known in the 4th century before the Common Era. This was the undertaking of Aristotle of Stagira, a figure whose intellectual imprint reshaped the course of Western thought for 2 millennia. His emergence occurred within a vibrant, fragmented intellectual landscape, a world grappling with fundamental questions about reality, knowledge, and the very nature of existence. 4th century BCE Greece pulsated with the legacies of earlier thinkers. The pre-Socratics had initiated a profound inquiry into the cosmos, seeking fundamental principles underlying appearances. Figures like Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes proposed elemental substances, water, the boundless, air, as primary realities. Heraclitus emphasized the perpetual flux of existence, famously stating 1 steps into a different river each time. The Eumenides championed the unchanging, eternal nature of being, arguing that change was an illusion of the senses. These diverse cosmologies and metaphysical stances presented a fundamental challenge: how to reconcile the apparent stability of the world with its undeniable processes of change, and how to bridge the gap between sensory experience and rational understanding. Entering this intellectual arena, Aristotle found himself immersed in the potent philosophical atmosphere of Plato's academy in Athens. Plato, his teacher for some 20 years, offered a powerful, comprehensive system centered on the theory of forms. For Plato, true reality resided in eternal, immutable forms accessible only through reason. The transient physical world perceived by the senses held a different status. The physical objects we encounter were imperfect copies of these perfect archetypes. A particular beautiful object participated in the form of beauty itself. Knowledge, on this view, meant apprehending these forms, a process recalling innate understanding. It involved a different path than deriving truths from the empirical world. Plato's philosophy provided a compelling framework for ethics, politics, and mathematics, fields where abstract reasoning seemed paramount. Applying this framework to the messy, changing world of nature presented its own set of challenges. How did the forms relate to the physical particulars? How could one study biology, for instance, if the true essence of a living thing lay in a non-physical realm? Aristotle's intellectual formation within the academy exposed him to the pinnacle of abstract philosophical inquiry. He absorbed the Socratic method of dialectic, the Platonic emphasis on rigorous argument, and the pursuit of universal truths. Within this environment, his innate intellectual inclinations began to assert themselves. Born in Stagira, a city in northern Greece, around 384 BCE, Aristotle's background offered a different perspective. His father, Nicomachus, served as physician to King Amyntas III of Macedon, exposing young Aristotle to the practical, empirical world of Macedon and biological observation from an early age. This familial connection to the methodical study of living things appears to have fostered a deep-seated respect for empirical data and a fascination with the intricate details of the natural world. Upon arriving at the academy, Aristotle became a dedicated student, respected for his intellect and diligence. He engaged deeply with Platonic doctrines, writing dialogues that initially mirrored his teacher's style and views. His own inquiries increasingly turned towards the concrete world. He sought understanding within the phenomena themselves, descending into the particulars. This inclination was apparent early in his studies and conversations within the academy's walls. He began to formulate questions that Platonic philosophy struggled to fully accommodate, questions about growth, change, generation, corruption, and the specific properties of different kinds of substances. The intellectual problems Aristotle inherited were manifold. Different pre-Socratics had pointed to material, efficient, or formal principles. A unified understanding of precision remained elusive. The relationship between universals, for example humanity, and particulars, for example Socrates, remained a subject of intense debate. The method for acquiring reliable knowledge about the natural world remained unclear, oscillating between pure abstract speculation and unsystematic observation. Furthermore, an established, formal method for evaluating the validity of arguments themselves remained undeveloped, leaving philosophical and scientific discourse vulnerable to sophistry and error. Aristotle's unique position, steeped in Platonic rigor and drawn to empirical reality, propelled him towards a distinct intellectual project. He perceived the need for a unified, systematic approach that could encompass the vast diversity of existence, spanning from the smallest organism to the structure of the cosmos, and from individual ethics to the organization of the state. His solution began to take shape as a monumental effort to bring order to this intellectual chaos. This involved developing a comprehensive system of classification, defining terms with precision, and establishing principles of reasoning that could apply across all domains of inquiry. His early work, even within the academy, shows signs of this emerging systematic drive. He began cataloging different branches of knowledge, distinguishing theoretical sciences such as physics and metaphysics, practical sciences such as ethics and politics, and productive sciences such as rhetoric and poetics. This organizational impulse was itself a response to the fragmented intellectual landscape. He sought to map the territory of knowledge before attempting to conquer it. The interplay between the Platonic emphasis on abstract, unchanging forms and Aristotle's growing interest in the dynamic, observable world became a fertile ground for his own philosophical development. While he respected his teacher profoundly, Aristotle's inquiries led him towards explanations that grounded reality in the substances and processes of the physical world. These investigations explored the nature of true being within this framework. This difference in fundamental orientation would eventually lead him to develop his own distinct metaphysical system, one that sought to explain change and stability by analyzing the inherent properties and potentials within individual things. His time at the academy, therefore, served as a crucial period of gestation. He mastered the existing philosophical tools and identified their limitations. When applied to the full breadth of reality he sought to understand, he saw the need for foundational principles, principles of being, principles of change, and, crucially, principles of reasoning that could provide a secure basis for all scientific and philosophical inquiry. This recognition of the need for a rigorous, universal method of thought would become the cornerstone of his initial, groundbreaking contributions, laying the groundwork for all that followed. He understood that before one could build a comprehensive understanding of the world, one first required the proper tools for thinking about it. This necessity spurred his foundational work on logic and the nature of knowledge itself. Aristotle of Stagira, having meticulously absorbed and critically evaluated the philosophical currents of his time, discerned a fundamental prerequisite for any genuine pursuit of knowledge about the world. He recognized that before one could confidently investigate the principles governing reality, change, or life itself, one required a reliable method for thinking clearly and determining what constitutes valid reasoning. The intellectual landscape of 4th century Greece, rich in rhetoric and often prone to sophistry, underscored the urgent need for a systematic approach to argument and demonstration. Distinguishing sound inference from persuasive but fallacious assertion posed a significant challenge, hindering the steady accumulation of reliable understanding. This profound need for intellectual tools, for the very rules of thought, spurred Aristotle to embark on a monumental task, the creation of formal logic. His collected works on the subject, later compiled and known as the Organon or instrument, represent an unprecedented achievement. He conceived of logic as the indispensable preliminary discipline the necessary equipment for engaging in any scientific or philosophical inquiry whatsoever, a discipline distinct from the sciences it served. It provided the framework for building arguments and evaluating their structure, a bedrock upon which all other knowledge could ideally rest. The Organon systematically lays out the components of this logical system. It begins with the categories, examining the fundamental ways in which things can be said to exist or be predicated of others: substance, quantity, quality, relation, place, time, position, state, action, and passion. Understanding these basic classifications of being and predication provided the vocabulary for constructing meaningful statements. Following this, to interpretation delves into propositions, analyzing how terms combine to form declarative sentences that possess truth value. Here, Aristotle explored the relationships between different types of statements, such as affirmation and negation, universality and particularity, laying the groundwork for understanding the structure of truth claims. The true heart of Aristotelian logic, however, resides in the prior analytics. Here, Aristotle introduced and rigorously developed the theory of the syllogism, his most celebrated contribution to formal reasoning. A syllogism constitutes a form of deductive inference, where a conclusion necessarily follows from two premises. Aristotle meticulously identified the structure of these inferences, classifying them based on the arrangement of terms of figures and the types of propositions involved in the moods. Consider the classic example: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This structure, involving a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion, exemplifies a valid syllogism in the first figure, mood barber. Aristotle analyzed numerous such forms, demonstrating which combinations guarantee a valid inference, that is, a conclusion that must be true if the premises are true independent of the specific content of the terms. He provided methods for testing the validity of syllogisms, including the use of logical diagrams and rules for converting syllogisms of one form into another. This was a revolutionary step, centering the analysis on the abstract structure of argument. He provided the first formal calculus of reasoning, a system where the validity of an argument could be determined by its form alone. The posterior analytics then explored the application of this logical framework to scientific knowledge and demonstration. The prior analytics focused on valid inference in general. The posterior analytics examined how one arrives at scientific knowledge, which Aristotle understood as knowledge of necessary truths derived from prior, more fundamental necessary truths. Scientific demonstration, in this view, proceeds from first principles, universal, necessary truths grasped through intuition or induction, and uses syllogistic reasoning to deduce conclusions about specific phenomena. This work outlined the structure of a rigorous scientific theory, emphasizing the need for definitions, axioms, and demonstrations that reveal the causes and necessary properties of things. It addressed the problem of how we come to know these first principles, suggesting a process rooted in experience. Aristotle's epistemology, his theory of how knowledge is acquired, complements his logic. He argued that all knowledge ultimately begins with sensory experience. We perceive individual things through our senses, and these perceptions leave impressions. Repeated perceptions of similar things, retained in memory, lead to experience. From multiple experiences of the same type of phenomenon, the mind, through a process of induction, is able to grasp the universal principle or form inherent in those particulars. This ascent from particular sensations to universal understanding, culminating in the grasping of necessary first principles, provided the starting points for the deductive demonstrations described in the posterior analytics. Knowledge, therefore, arises from an interaction between the external world acting on our senses and the mind's capacity to abstract universals from particulars and reason deductively from principles. The remaining parts of the Organon, the topics and sophistical refutations, dealt with dialectical reasoning and the identification of fallacies. The topics explored methods for constructing probable arguments on any given subject, useful in debate and philosophical inquiry, where immediate certainty regarding first principles is less common. The sophistical refutations provided a systematic analysis of deceptive arguments, identifying common fallacies in reasoning. These works equipped individuals with the tools to engage in reasoned discourse and protect themselves from intellectual trickery, further solidifying logic's role as an instrument for clear and effective thinking. Aristotle's logical system, particularly the theory of the syllogism, exerted an unparalleled influence on Western thought for over 2 millennia. It became the standard model of valid reasoning, taught and elaborated upon by generations of scholars. Its principles permeated philosophical, scientific, and theological discourse throughout the Hellenistic period, the Roman Empire, the Islamic Gold Age, and the European Middle Ages. Modern symbolic logic, developed in the 19th and 20th centuries, offers a far more powerful and comprehensive framework for analyzing complex arguments and mathematical foundations. Aristotelian logic provided historical foundation. It provided the initial rigorous attempt to formalize reasoning, identifying key concepts like validity, premise, and conclusion that are still essential to the study of logic today. The problems he grappled with, including how to reason correctly, how to build reliable knowledge from experience, and how to discern truth, remain perennial concerns central to philosophy, science, and indeed, everyday life. His work on logic and epistemology provided the essential intellectual scaffolding. Equipped with this powerful instrument for analysis and demonstration, Aristotle was prepared to turn his incisive gaze and systematic methodology towards the natural world itself. Having established the rules for thinking about reality, he was ready to investigate its myriad forms and processes, applying his newly forged tools to the vast and complex realm of nature. This systematic application of his logical and epistemological framework to the observable universe would characterize the next monumental phase of his intellectual project. With the foundational principles of reasoning established, Aristotle embarked upon a monumental project, the systematic investigation of the visible world. Having forged the intellectual instruments for clear thought and sound argument, he turned his penetrating gaze to the cosmos itself and the myriad phenomena it contained. This phase of his work involved empirical inquiry, representing a profound departure from abstract philosophical speculation and marking a pivotal moment in the history of scientific thought. The intellectual landscape of his time presented formidable challenges concerning the natural world. Explaining motion, understanding the processes of change, identifying the underlying causes of phenomena, and accounting for the composition of the cosmos were central, unresolved puzzles. Pre-Socratic thinkers offered various material or abstract principles. A comprehensive, systematic framework for analyzing natural processes remained elusive. Aristotle sought to provide precisely this framework, grounding his explanations in careful observation and a refined understanding of causation. His unique solution to the problem of change and causation centered on his doctrine of the four causes. He proposed that to fully understand any natural phenomenon or object, one must identify its material cause, its formal cause, its efficient cause, and its final cause. The material cause refers to the stuff out of which something is made, such as the bronze of a statue or the wood of a table. The formal cause describes the form or essence of a thing, its structure and definition, for instance, the shape of the statue or the design of the table that makes it a table. The efficient cause is the primary source of the change or rest, for example, the sculptor shaping the bronze of the carpenter building the table. Finally, the final cause, or telos, represents the purpose or end for which a thing exists or change occurs, including the statue's purpose as a work of art or the table's function for holding objects. This quadripartite analysis offered a deeply insightful and comprehensive way to understand the why of things in nature. It incorporated the inherent structure and the inherent purpose or function, providing a rich explanatory model applicable across a vast range of natural phenomena. A seed's material cause is its organic matter. Its formal cause is the specific structure that defines it as a seed of a particular plant species. Its evasion cause is the parent plant that produced it, and its final cause is its potential to grow into a mature plant of that species. This framework provided a powerful analytical lens that structured scientific inquiry for centuries. Building upon this causal framework, Aristotle also elaborated the concepts of potentiality and actuality, particularly relevant for understanding natural processes like growth and development. A seed possesses the potentiality to become a tree. The mature tree represents the actuality of that potential. Change within this view involves the movement from potentiality to actuality. This provided a way to conceptualize growth, generation, and other transformations as inherent processes guided by the formal and final causes embedded within the substance itself. It offered a dynamic understanding of nature, where things moved towards their inherent ends. Turning his attention to the cosmos, Aristotle confronted the problems of celestial and terrestrial motion. How did the stars and planets move? What caused objects on Earth to fall or rise? His solutions, articulated in works like the Physics and on the Heavens, formed the basis of Western cosmology and physics for over a millennium. He proposed a geocentric model of the universe, with the Earth fixed at the center, surrounded by concentric crystalline spheres carrying the moon, sun, planets, and stars. His physics encompassed the terrestrial realm, composed of the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire, alongside the celestial realm, composed of a fifth element, the ether. Each terrestrial element had a natural place in the cosmos, and their motion was explained by their tendency to move towards this place: earth and water downwards, air and fire upwards. Celestial bodies, made of ether, moved in perfect, eternal circles around the earth. Their motion was inherent to their nature, needing no external force. This system provided a coherent and mathematically describable model that accounted for observed celestial movements with remarkable elegance for its time, serving as the dominant framework for centuries. It explained why smoke rises and stones fall, and why the stars followed predictable paths across the night sky. Perhaps the most astonishing testament to Aristotle's empirical method lies in his extensive biological investigations. Faced with the immense diversity of living organisms, from the simplest plants to complex animals, he undertook a project of systematic observation, description, and classification on an unprecedented scale. The problems he tackled included understanding the structures of organisms, how their parts functioned, how they reproduced, and how they related to one another. His approach involved detailed observation, often including dissection of animals. He meticulously recorded anatomical features, behaviors, and life cycles. His biological works, including the history of animals, parts of animals, and generation of animals, are filled with thousands of specific observations about hundreds of different species, ranging from insects and marine life to birds and mammals. He described the digestive system of ruminants, the reproductive habits of sharks, the social structure of bees, and the development of embryos in eggs. Aristotle sought to classify this vast array of life based on shared characteristics, moving towards a hierarchical organization. He grouped animals based on properties, including blood presence, roughly corresponding to vertebrates and invertebrates, and modes of reproduction, such as live-bearing and egg-laying. His classifications represented a pioneering effort to bring order and structure to the biological world based on empirical similarities and differences. Central to his biological explanations was the concept of the final cause or purpose. He understood the parts of an organism in terms of their function: eyes for seeing, teeth for chewing, wings for flying. This teleological perspective provided a powerful framework for understanding biological complexity. The structure of the bird's wing was explained by its purpose, the facilitation of flight. Aristotle's focus on function highlighted a crucial aspect of biological organization that remains relevant in fields like functional anatomy and physiology. His detailed descriptions of anatomical structures and physiological processes were foundational, providing a wealth of empirical data that subsequent generations of biologists built upon. The enduring impact of Aristotle's natural philosophy and biology is complex. His geocentric cosmology and physics were eventually superseded by the heliocentric model and the physics of Newton during the scientific revolution. The emphasis on final causes in physics gave way to a focus on efficient causes and mathematical laws. However, his biological work stands as a monumental achievement in empirical science. His commitment to detailed observation, systematic description, and classification laid the essential groundwork for the development of biological science. The problems he identified, understanding the diversity of life, the function of biological structures, and the processes of reproduction, remain central to biology today, though the methods of inquiry and the explanatory frameworks have evolved dramatically. His legacy in these fields underscores the profound importance of empirical investigation and the power of systematic thought in unraveling the complexities of the natural world. This deep dive into nature's workings prepared the ground for his further inquiries into the fundamental nature of reality and the principles governing human life and society. The diligent inquiry into nature's observable phenomena, the systematic cataloging of life forms, and the rigorous analysis of physical processes provided a powerful foundation. This empirical groundwork naturally led to deeper questions concerning the fundamental character of existence itself and the principles governing human life and communal organization. Having explored the particulars of the natural world, thought ascended to contemplate being core being, existence considered purely as existence, distinct from any specific kind of being. This undertaking became known as metaphysics, a discipline seeking the first principles and ultimate causes underlying all reality. The intellectual challenges here were profound. How could one understand the persistent identity of things amidst constant change? What constituted the essence of a substance? What were the fundamental drivers of becoming and perishing? Plato, the esteemed teacher, had posited a realm of eternal, unchanging forms providing the true reality, with the physical world merely a shadow or imitation. Aristotle sought an explanation rooted within the sensible world itself, finding the structure and essence of things residing within their physical manifestations. His unique solution involved the development of hylomorphism, the theory that individual substances are composites of matter. In form, matter provides the potential for existence, the stuff out of which something is made. Form provides the structure, the essence, the defining characteristics that make a thing what it is. A bronze statue, for instance, comprises bronze as matter shaped into a specific figure as form. The form of the statue resides entirely within the bronze itself. Its existence depends upon actualization in matter. This framework provided a powerful way to understand both the stability of identity and the process of change within the empirical world. Change then involves transition from one form to another, or the actualization of potential inherent in matter. Central to this understanding of change was a distinction between potentiality, known as dynamism, and actuality, termed energy or intelligia. Potentiality represents the capacity for something to be or to become. Actuality represents the state of being complete or fully realized. A seed holds the potentiality to become a tree. The mature tree represents the potentiality brought to actuality. A block of marble possesses the potentiality to become a sculpture. The finished sculpture is the actuality. This conceptual pair allowed for nuanced account of growth, development, and alteration, explaining how things transition from what they could be to what they are, a process driven by inherent principles. Furthermore, to fully grasp why things are as they are and how they change, Aristotle articulated his doctrine of the four causes. These were explanatory factors, different ways of answering the question why. The material cause identified the stuff something is made from, the bronze of the statue. The formal cause identified its structure or essence, the shape of the statue. The efficient cause identified the primary source of the change or creation, the sculptor. The final cause, perhaps the most distinctive and influential aspect of his system, identified the purpose or end, telos, for which something exists or happens. The statue's purpose might be aesthetic pleasure or commemoration. This teleological perspective, seeing purpose inherent in nature, deeply informed his biological work and extended to his metaphysical understanding of the cosmos. The series of changes observed in the world, the transitions from potentiality to actuality, demanded an ultimate explanation for motion and change itself. This led to the concept of the unmoved mover. There must be a first cause, something eternal, pure actuality, that initiates motion while remaining unmoved and unchanged. This ultimate cause is conceived as perfect, engaged in eternal thought, contemplating only the most perfect object, which is itself. The unmoved mover serves as the final cause of the universe, drawing things towards itself through desire or aspiration, much like a beloved object draws a lover. Efficient causes operate by pushing things along. This metaphysical peak provided a capstone to his understanding of reality, grounding the dynamic processes of the world in an ultimate, perfect source of being and motion. The exploration of fundamental reality naturally transitioned to an inquiry into the nature of human existence and the principles that ought to govern our lives. For Aristotle, ethics was a practical science aimed at discovering the highest human good. This discipline extended beyond a mere set of rules or commandments. The central problem was identifying the ultimate end or purpose of human life, that which we pursue for its own sake, and for the sake of which we pursue everything else. His unique solution, articulated most comprehensively in the Nicomachean Ethics, identified this ultimate good as eudaimonia, a term often translated as flourishing, living well, or achieving fulfillment. Eudaimonia represents a state of living in accordance with virtue over a complete life. Eudaimonia signifies an active way of being, a kind of activity of the soul aligned with perfect virtue. It stands apart from fleeting pleasure or a passive state. Achieving eudaimonia requires the cultivation of character virtues. These virtues are dispositions or states of character that enable a person to act well and feel appropriately. They are developed through habit and practice. Similar to mastering a skill, courage develops through courageous actions, temperance through temperate ones. Virtue represents a mean state between two extremes of vice, one of excess, the other of deficiency. Courage, for instance, lies between the deficiency of cowardice and the excess of recklessness. Generosity lies between stinginess and prodigality. This concept of the golden mean is central to his virtue ethics. The mean constitutes a relative mean, determined by reason and practical wisdom, differing from a strict mathematical average. Finding the mean appropriate for a specific individual in a specific situation requires sound judgment. This highlights the crucial role of intellectual virtue, particularly phronsis, or practical wisdom. Phronsis is the capacity to deliberate well about what promotes the good life in general and to discern the correct course of action in particular circumstances. It involves understanding the specific context, weighing different factors, and applying general principles to arrive at the virtuous choice. Virtue is thus a state involving deliberate choice, lying in a mean relative to us determined by reason, such as a practically wise person would determine it. Humans are inherently social and political animals. The ethical life, the pursuit of eudaimonia, finds full realization within community. This understanding provided a seamless transition from ethics to politics. The problem for politics became identifying the best form of political association, the polis or city-state, capable of fostering the conditions necessary for its citizens to live virtuous lives and achieve flourishing. In the politics, Aristotle undertook a comprehensive empirical study of existing political systems. He famously collected and analyzed the constitutions of 158 Greek city-states, seeking to understand the various forms of governance and their effects on the lives of citizens. This empirical approach distinguished his political philosophy. He classified regimes based on the number of rulers, one, few, or many, and whether they ruled for the common good, kingship, aristocracy, polity, or for their own advantage, tyranny, oligarchy, democracy. He saw potential in kingship and aristocracy in their ideal forms. He often favored the polity, a mixed constitution blending elements of oligarchy and democracy, regarding it as the most stable and practical form for most states, representing rule by the many for the common good. The polis, for Aristotle, was a natural and necessary environment for human flourishing. It was a community where individuals could fully develop their capacities, exercise their virtues, and participate in the activities that constitute the good life. Political science, then, was the master science concerned with the highest good achievable by action, the good of the polis, which encompasses the good of the individual. The purpose of the state was promoting the virtuous life of its citizens. The influence of these interconnected philosophical systems has resonated through millennia. Aristotle's metaphysics provided the dominant framework for understanding reality in Western thought for centuries, shaping philosophical and theological discourse through the Middle Ages. Concepts like holomorphism, potentiality, and actuality, and the four causes became fundamental tools for analysis. His teleological physics eventually yielded to the mechanistic explanations of the scientific revolution. His fundamental questions about existence, substance, and precision remain central to metaphysical inquiry today. His virtue ethics has experienced a significant resurgence in contemporary moral philosophy. It offers a compelling approach in contemporary moral philosophy. This framework emphasizes character development, the nature of the good life, and the role of practical wisdom in moral decision-making. Philosophers today continue to engage with his ideas about virtue, habituation, and flourishing. Similarly, his political analysis remains a cornerstone of political theory. His classification of regimes, his insights into the dynamics of different forms of government, and his arguments for the importance of the polis or the state in facilitating human flourishing continue to inform contemporary discussions about governance, citizenship, and the purpose of political life. His empirical approach to studying constitutions also foreshadowed later developments in political science. These inquiries into the fundamental nature of being and the principles guiding human life and society represent the culmination of his systematic intellectual project, building upon his detailed observations of the natural world to construct a comprehensive vision of reality and humanity's place within it. The vibrant intellectual community Aristotle fostered at the Lyceum continued its work following his death in 322 BCE. The school, known as a peripatetic school for its practice of discussing philosophy while working, was led by his successor, Theophrastus of Eresos. Theophrastus, a prolific scholar in his own right, particularly in botany, maintained the empirical and systematic spirit of his predecessor. However, the fate of Aristotle's personal library and his most important esoteric treatises, lecture notes, and working papers that formed the basis of works like the Metaphysics, Physics, and Organon is a tale shrouded in historical mists and dramatic twists. According to ancient accounts, these invaluable manuscripts were passed down through generations, eventually reaching Nullitus of sepsis. To preserve them from potential seizure by the book-collecting kings of Pergamon, they were reportedly hidden in a cellar, suffering damage from damp and worms over centuries. This period of obscurity lasted until the 1st century BCE, when the manuscripts were rediscovered, brought to Rome, and edited by Andronicus of Rhodes. It was Andronicus who was credited with arranging many of the texts into the form we largely know today, including grouping the treatises that came to be called metaphysics because they were placed after the physics in his arrangement. This rediscovery and organization were pivotal, transforming Aristotle from a figure known primarily through popular dialogues and summaries into the systematic philosopher whose profound and challenging treatises could now be studied in depth. Without this recovery, much of the subsequent history of philosophy and science would have unfolded along entirely different lines. From Rome, the influence of the newly accessible Aristotelian corpus began to spread, initially within the Hellenistic and Roman worlds, but its most dramatic and consequential journey would take it eastward. As the Roman Empire declined in the west, centers of learning in the east, particularly in the Byzantine Empire and later the burgeoning Islamic world, became the custodians and interpreters of ancient Greek knowledge. Scholars in cities like Alexandria and Baghdad embarked on a monumental translation movement. Syriac Christian scholars initially played a crucial role, translating Greek texts into Syriac, which then served as intermediaries for translation into Arabic. The Islamic Golden Age, roughly spanning the 8th to the 13th centuries, witnessed an explosion of intellectual activity, with Aristotle standing at its very center. Thinkers across the Islamic world engaged with his logic, physics, metaphysics, and ethics with unparalleled rigor and originality. Figures like Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and Averroes Ibn Rushd preserved his work, critically analyzed it, commented upon it extensively, and built upon its foundations to develop their own sophisticated philosophical and scientific systems. Al-Farabi, for instance, was known as a second teacher, Aristotle being the first for his mastery of logic and his efforts to synthesize Aristotelian and Platonic thought. Avicenna, a physician and philosopher of immense stature, developed a comprehensive philosophical system that integrated Aristotelian physics and metaphysics with Neoplatonic emanationism and Islamic theological concerns. His canon of medicine, deeply influenced by Aristotelian biology and methodology, remained the standard medical text in both the Islamic world and Europe for centuries. Averroes, working in Al-Andalus Islamic Spain, became arguably Aristotle's most dedicated commentator. He sought to present Aristotle's philosophy in its purest form, offering an interpretation distinct from later readings and challenging Avicenna on certain points. His detailed commentaries on Aristotle's works became incredibly influential, eventually playing a crucial role in the reintroduction of the full Aristotelian corpus to Western Europe. The translation of Aristotelian thought from the Islamic world to the Latin West occurred primarily through translation efforts in the 12th and 13th centuries, particularly in centers like Toledo. Scholars like Gerard of Cremona translated numerous Arabic texts, including Averroes' commentaries and Avicenna's works, into Latin. This influx of previously unavailable Aristotelian texts had a revolutionary impact on Western European intellectual life. Before this, the West had access to only a limited portion of Aristotle's logical works, the Old Logic. The arrival of his complete Organon, along with his treatises on physics, metaphysics, ethics, and politics, presented medieval scholars with a comprehensive and systematic framework for understanding the cosmos and humanity's place within it, far exceeding anything previously available. The challenge for medieval scholars was to integrate this powerful pagan philosophy with Christian theology. This monumental task was most famously undertaken by Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. Aquinas, recognizing the intellectual power and coherence of Aristotle's system, employed Aristotelian concepts and methods, particularly his logic, metaphysics, hylomorphism, potentiality, and actuality, the four causes, and ethics, to construct a grand synthesis of faith and reason. He used Aristotelian philosophy as a philosophical handmaiden to theology, providing a rational structure for understanding Christian doctrine. Aquinas' work, the Summa Theologica, became a cornerstone of Catholic theology and solidified Aristotle's position as the philosopher in the medieval universities. His influence permeated the curriculum, shaping modes of thought and inquiry across disciplines for centuries. Aristotelianism held unquestioned dominance in the West, a position challenged during the Renaissance and significantly altered by the scientific revolution. Renaissance humanists admired Aristotle's ethical and political works, along with his contributions to rhetoric and poetry. They frequently critiqued scholastic interpretations of his natural philosophy and metaphysics, advocating a return to original sources and other ancient thinkers such as Plato. The true seismic shift came with the pioneers of modern science, figures like Nicolaus Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, Johannes Kepler, René Descartes, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton systematically questioned and eventually overturned key tenets of Aristotelian physics and cosmology. Galileo's experiments with falling bodies challenged the Aristotelian notion that heavy objects fall faster. His telescopic observations provided evidence supporting a heliocentric model, directly contradicting the Aristotelian Ptolemaic geocentric universe. Descartes' emphasis on mathematical reasoning and Bacon's advocacy for empirical induction and experimentation offered new methodological paradigms that differed significantly from Aristotle's approach to natural philosophy. Newton's synthesis of celestial and terrestrial mechanics, formulated through mathematical laws like his laws of motion and universal gravitation, provided a new, unified framework for understanding the physical world that rendered Aristotelian physics obsolete as a description of reality. This period marked a decline in Aristotle's authority in natural science. His specific explanations for physical phenomena, based on concepts like natural place, teleological final causes in physics, and the incorruptibility of the celestial spheres, were superseded by mathematical laws and mechanical explanations. Understanding the nature of the superseded elements holds crucial importance. The superseded elements consisted primarily of his specific scientific theories concerning the physical world, theories formulated using the observational tools and conceptual frameworks available in the 4th century BCE. The overturning of his physics and cosmology occurred. Aristotle's influence continued significantly in other domains. His contributions to logic, compiled in the Organon, remained the standard for reasoning and argumentation for over 2 millennia. Modern mathematical logic, emerging in the 9th and 20th centuries, fundamentally expanded upon and challenged the standard. His biological observations and classifications, which contained certain errors, represented the most extensive and systematic empirical study of the living world undertaken in antiquity. They provided a foundation for later biological inquiry. His work on the philosophy of science, particularly his analysis of causation and explanation, continued to be debated and reinterpreted. Furthermore, his contributions to metaphysics, ethics, politics, rhetoric, and poetics retain immense philosophical vitality. Contemporary philosophers engage deeply with his ideas on substance, potentiality, and actuality, virtue ethics as a character-based approach to morality, political theory centered on the polis and human flourishing, and the analysis of persuasive speech and dramatic structure. The systematic nature of his inquiry, his commitment to empirical observation as a starting point, and his attempt to create a unified understanding of reality, encompassing everything from the smallest organism to the structure of the state and the nature of the divine, continue to inspire and challenge thinkers. Aristotle's enduring relevance stems perhaps from the questions he posed and the rigorous methods he developed to approach them. He demonstrated the power of systematic observation, logical analysis, and comprehensive categorization as tools for understanding the world. He established foundational concepts and distinctions that shaped the language of intellectual discourse for centuries. His intellectual journey was one of unparalleled ambition to understand reality in its totality, drawing connections between seemingly disparate fields of knowledge. While the scientific map he drew of the universe has been redrawn countless times, the spirit of his inquiry, the relentless pursuit of understanding through observation, reason, and systematic investigation remains a cornerstone of academic and scientific endeavor. His legacy is a testament to the power of a single mind to shape the course of human thought, providing both a foundation upon which to build and a formidable structure against which subsequent generations could test their own ideas, ensuring that the conversation he began continues to resonate across millennia.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.